start? I have the program.
I can, is it you want? I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. So indeed, I'm a member of the Université ParisSaclay University. In fact, as reminded this morning, that we have had an exceptional morning, of course, session. Some of the speakers, including Sandrine Lacombe, reminded the priorities and the objectives and I would say the identity of what we are trying to build together and what we are indeed building all together, this European Alliance. And among the dimensions of this EUGLOH European Alliance, the research part is something which is clearly in our minds and which has been enabled partially by a Horizon project that indeed ended on last 31 of December, just at the beginning of this year, in fact, okay. But our ambition is probably to go much farther because indeed what has been reported through the different sessions, what we are doing, because of course, we are all aware of what is done, perhaps not with much detail in every dimension of the Erasmus Plus project within the different work packages, but anyway, globally speaking, most of our actions are exceptional actions. Anyway, they are devoted to education, to open-mindedness beyond, strictly speaking, education, training the young generations through disciplinary means, but also, of course, interdisciplinary means and I would say transverse skills, etc. All these dimensions, be them through entrepreneurship, projects-oriented trainings, etc. There are research-based learning, etc. But everything is more or less connected to education. But we know also that within comprehensive large universities in ecosystems, we have also many other purposes, including research. Research is highly connected to education. I think I do not have to try to convince you. We have also private companies. We have also territories, etc. So what we are trying to build all together goes much farther. Education, in a strict speaking, in a strict meaning, and this is obvious to anyone. But so this is also the reason why we need research, because research, okay, is related to education, but also because research is of strong interest for our relationships with the stakeholders, the private companies, the NGOs, etc. So this is part of the story, whatever we do and whatever we think. Very concretely, as the grants. The Alliance goes beyond the Erasmus Plus grant, even if this is the main source of funding, okay? This is a starting point, very important starting point, but also we need other dimensions, and this is the reason why we are, and there is a governing board this afternoon. Probably the directors will discuss it. I'm sure it is at the agenda of the meeting. They will discuss about the research activities. So myself, I have been the coordinator of this project, the EUGLOHRIA project, research, maybe with the mouse, it's better. Research Innovation Action of the EUGLOH Alliance, so and this project, of course, what I'm showing now is the result of the collective efforts of the 5 members. We have also all along the last period of the project opened the main conclusion of the project to the 9 universities, to the 5 plus 4 universities, and everything is available. So I have been the coordinator, and I'm very happy here, very glad and I'm delighted to present some ideas. Okay, this is the reason why when the organization team that I would like to thank also, the Szeged University active organizing team. When you have asked me a title, okay, my title is a bit long, so usually we tell to our students, please try to consider short titles. My title is a bit long, but anyway. So you see, the point is just to fit the reflection about the way we could stimulate research activities just by giving you more or less a state of the play of what we have done. And of course, this is a roundtable also, this is open to discussion, of course. So just to remind, some of you already know that, but perhaps not all the members. So the EUGLOHRIA project just ended on January 1st of this year after 3 years. And it was a science-driven for society call, practically speaking, of the Horizon framework program. So the old one, because it was one of the last projects that was funded, in fact. And this is part of the galaxy of the landscape of the EUGLOH Alliance with the Erasmus Plus grant. But we know that also there are some national top-ups in some cases, etc. So EUGLOH goes beyond the Erasmus Plus grant. Okay. These projects had mainly 3 objectives, because there was a catalogue of objectives that the European Commission proposed us to investigate, and we decided with within the circle of the 5 members, so Szeged University, University of Porto, LMU, Lund University, and UPSaclay University. So we decided commonly to explore 3 dimensions. The first one was devoted to pandemics research. So it can appear, so research, not education, research, okay? But the main approach was to develop to exchange best practices and to exchange our knowledge, our ecosystem, the strengths and the weaknesses sometimes of our research ecosystems related to pandemics research, the research platforms, and the links with the innovation ecosystems, including everything connected to academia business relationships. So the set of incubators that we had within our ecosystems, the links with some important private companies, etc., be them large or small or medium-sized, etc. And so we have developed a pretty large set of works devoted to these 3 dimensions. So regarding the first one, the research on pandemic crisis, it was more or less in line with the COVID-19 pandemics. It was to some extent inspired by the COVID-19 pandemics, but we decided that not to restrain and to limit our research activities to that topic, okay, but to use this topic, this well-identified topic of pandemic crisis, as a testbed research domain in which we could investigate the way we could, in the better way, work together towards research, common research activities, relying on the research platforms, the second dimension. But this topic, this pretty large, but anyway, specific, in the same time, specific topic of pandemic research is not considered as the only research topic, of course, that we have comprehensive university. So if we are able to do it regarding pandemic research, it means that we are able to connect our research units, our research laboratories, and so it means that we will be able to do it for most of the topics of interest that are currently discussed within the project, be them from chemistry, medicine, but also social and human sciences, etc., and the interplay between the different disciplines. It was only a test bed. This, as a short reminder also, at least 2 of these 3 dimensions are among also the criteria that were chosen at the beginning of the Alliance by the rectors, and also when the Alliance was extended to 9 members, to select the universities to build, in fact, the consortium. Our universities have a very large set of research infrastructures, large-scale infrastructures. It's obvious here in Szeged with ELA, etc., but it's the case everywhere. Okay, we have also many companies, and we have large ecosystems with different organizations that we have discussed during 3 years, different ways to let the project come from academia, academic labs to small startups, help them to grow, etc. So we have a set of innovation chain at the different sites, which is not always organized the same way, but at least the TTOs have discussed, the heads of the TTOs have discussed all together, etc. This is the different dimensions that we have explored. And we have also received marks of interest from the private companies to approach our universities, because we have a large set of research infrastructures, and because they wanted also to identify academic and industrial partners to go towards Horizon Europe and now FP10 perhaps in the future funded projects, research projects. So we have worked in these different areas. in the limited amount of time, I would not have enough time to detail everything, but just to tell you that we have considered that it was important to do inventories. So we have made an inventory of the research expertise on pandemics. We gathered more than 300 research-funded projects at the level of our 5 universities. We have also made in-depth work on the identification of the research infrastructures. That was led by the Guerda University. We have written a handbook of 800 pages of inventory of the research infrastructures only at the 5 universities. Okay, so this is something that is discussed to be extended at the level of the 9 universities. And we have created also a large set of academia business connections through different events organized throughout the project. And on top of that, we were a bit frustrated because the roadmap of the Commission and what we wrote in the project at the beginning was to work mainly on the research practices. But also we were a bit frustrated because, in fact, working on the research practices, we could do research altogether was not enough. So we decided also, starting in the project, but this is a dimension that has expanded after, we decided to propose to our research communities seed funds. And this is part, perhaps, of what we could do in the future. So seed-funded projects with small amount of funding, small, let's say, between 5 and 20 €, thousands of euros per project, to facilitate the connection between the research teams with at least 2 EUGLOH partners. And you see here typically a selection of the research. So we are able to facilitate the launching of 20 research projects relying on 14 large-scale infrastructures shared. So some researchers from one university doing experiments in another EUGLOH universities, etc. And all of this have been possible, of course, because researchers have been effectively involved in that process coming from the different universities. Some of you may recognize researchers and colleagues, perhaps in some cases from UPSaclay, from Uporto, from Lund, from LMU, etc. Okay, so in brief, so the main outcomes of the project was to do different inventories, to progress all together in the knowledge, in the common knowledge that we had with respect to our relationships to incubators and private companies, to propose an entry point to the research platforms and infrastructures, okay, of the 5 members. So we have a web page. So the communication dissemination was very professionally led by LMU. So we have a web page with an entry point in which you can have access to the different research platforms and infrastructure platforms of the universities, and this is something that was pretty easy and work that we carried out. And we have also a collection of we have a network of relationships with the private stakeholders at the different sites. Okay. Again, what we have tested was only a test bed, so one of the possible dimensions that could be expanded, and that is currently expanded at the level of the 9 members. But the motivation to share the platforms is obvious. Our platforms are not always 100% occupied. Okay, the research platforms are very expensive. The large scale, especially the large scale infrastructure research platform infrastructures are very expensive. And this is also these are radiologics that exist in Europe. Okay, there are different. So there is a roadmap of the research infrastructures in Europe, but within EUGLOH, okay, as we are common partners of the same alliance, the idea is progressively to have access to the research platforms of the partners, as though we would have access to a research platform of another institute of our own university. So meaning more or less, after the devil is inside the details, but after everything should be discussed case by case, but the general idea is to consider the EUGLOH partners with respect to the platforms as internal users and not external users. Okay, this is the idea. At least this is the roadmap, and this is the direction towards we go. And okay, that could be, and that will be probably expanded at the level at least of the 9 partners, and perhaps with the associated partners, but this is a decision that should be considered by the EB and the governing board directors, of course. So regarding the stakeholders, led by Porto, okay, this dimension was led by Porto again, okay. We had a pretty large set of meetings, and also connection with the territories, the Porto cities, the city of Porto, etc. I was very active in helping the connections with the EUGLOH Alliance. Here are some photos that of a workshop that we organized in October, last October in Porto. So as a whole, you see there is a contribution to the discussion and to the reflection how we could stimulate research activities within EUGLOH. What we have experienced is that matchmaking within, sorry, I have to remain close to the microphone. Matchmaking between researchers is something that we can do within the EUGLOH partners, that we could do also at the size of the 9 universities, at least, okay? And if we can propose some incentives to the research teams, okay, it works. And we have plenty of testimonies of research, of sets of research teams that didn't cooperate before EUGLOH, before EUGLOHRIA, and that clearly stated that EUGLOHRIA was a first step to know each other's, to begin to collaborate, and some of them, 2 or 3 of them, are currently preparing Horizon projects. So it means that the expansion is possible. So this is like a garden with some vegetables or whatever. We need to put some water, some seeds, etc. So with incentives, matchmaking, etc., it can work. And presently, there is a reflection, especially within Work Package 7, on the way we could guide this bottom-up approach by some research, the political strategic direction at least, be them pretty broad, so that at least it can flourish, but not in all directions in the same way. Okay, thanks a lot. So maybe the question at the end? No? Okay. Alors, oui, non, c'est ça.
So thank you, Professor Cassan, for that really nice presentation. We'll switch now to the questions. I will introduce the first question. You talked about EUGLOHRIA, a project on more than 3 years that had many results. What are the next steps? Like, are there some negotiation now inside EUGLOH concerning like EUGLOHRIA 2.0? What are the next steps on?
Okay,
on
so
that?
I'm a small part of the response, but I can give you my contribution. The immediate idea was to do a copy-paste EUGLOHRIA 2.0 project, but the European Commission tools, funding tools, are not available. Okay, in the same shape. I mean, this kind of SWAF project has been stopped by the Commission because we have already entered the 2025-27 last period of Horizon Europe. We are going ahead towards FP10, etc. So, but in the same time, there are different projects that can be submitted using other Horizon Europe tools. There is a strategic reflection which is driven by Work Package 7. And also there are different means at the different universities. For example, the DAAD is of great help to Hamburg University, for example, to organize a set of workshops, matchmaking workshops between the researchers. Porto University, if I've well understood, so the national level in Portugal has given something like 30 PhD scholarships, working contracts for 3 to 4 years, 36 to 48 months, to favor the research activities between EUGLOH partners. So definitely we have to go to new Horizon projects, but probably it can start from the bottom communities, the researchers, but in the same time, there is a need to structure a little bit what we are doing in research. Okay. So the same tool is not available, but there are plenty of opportunities.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I just would like to.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay, thanks a lot.
So you will do the next one. Yeah, you can start. You can start. You want me to introduce you? Okay. So now we will switch to Lovisa Nyman, Dr. Lovisa Nyman, that will talk about existential sustainability, so it's pretty hard to say, and expanding the discourse of sustainability, more focused on her way of research. She's working more on existential questions, theological questions, ethics questions, and we will see how we could lead that and how we could see how this could be applied also to an alliance objectives, to different collaboration objectives. Thank you.
Yes, I'm very happy to be here today to present some perspectives on existential sustainability. I'm an outsider to the EUGLOH organization. I'm a researcher in studies in faith and worldviews, and that includes philosophy of religion, ethics, and systematic theology. So I come from the humanities faculties. So I will give you a 20-minute perspective from a humanities research perspective. So I hope you will bear with me through that. And I would like to give you a short overview today of how my colleague Johanna Gustafsson Lundberg and I theorize existential sustainability at the moment. Existential sustainability is a fairly new concept and connects to the sustainability goals and research, of course, but it addresses a lacuna that several instances have identified as insufficiently filled by the environmental and social and economic goals. In a wide sense, existential sustainability concerns that human living conditions have to be sustainable in a way that is not necessarily or obviously included in environmental, social, and economic sustainability. The existential dimensions of what it is to be human have to be part of our strivings for a sustainable society. But this does not mean that there is a fourth pillar to the SDGs. We rather think that existential sustainability is part of the other dimensions and maybe an aspect that connects the different dimensions on sustainability. So existential perspectives can be what links together them, and existential or environmental sustainability would maybe not be sustainable without an existential perspective. And at the moment, there is no academic definition of existential sustainability, but the need for an existential perspective on sustainability is addressed in several different contexts. And the concept has been coined in several contexts in Sweden at the same time, as it seems independently of each other. Antje Jackelén, Archbishop Emerita of the Church of Sweden, which is a large Lutheran church, has written on the concept, and she also adds spiritual sustainability. Cultural anthropologist Mikael Kurkiala mentions it in his book, When the Soul Goes into Exile. And at Lund University, the concept was coined by scholars in history of art, when they wanted to point to the contributions of art to the sustainable society that aren't necessarily included in the three pillars of sustainability so far. And Lund University has been using the concept in its overarching work on culture, art, and innovation. And also the innovation platform Future by Lund, that the university is part of, works with existential sustainability as its guideline. The Center for Theology and Religious Studies in Lund has linked up to this work and can now be considered a hub for the emerging research and education on existential sustainability. We collaborate with researchers from a vast difference of fields like medicine, psychology, architecture, sustainability studies, gender studies, economics, history of art, fine and performing arts, anthropology, cognitive science, political science, and science and technology studies. The academic context for existential sustainability is, of course, sustainability research in a wide sense, but it also borders on two fields that we are not ourselves working in, and that is existential health and the theories of inner development goals and inner transformation within sustainability studies. Existential health, as I understand it, is more oriented towards programs and interventions to attain quality of life for the individual and to map all the different aspects of health that needs to be addressed for this. The theory of inner development goals has a similar ambition, but with sustainability as its focus. Here, modernity and modern ways of thinking and living are critiqued for being the root cause of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. And by encouraging people to go through an inner transformation, as they call it, the outer transition will be possible. But when addressing the existential part of human life, the humanities in a wide sense, but more specifically also religious studies and studies in faith and worldviews, are of course constantly working from this on different angles. And this is also in line with our understanding of existential sustainability, that it cannot be unambiguously defined or converted to a program, but will mean different things in different contexts. However, we agree with the inner development goal theories that worldviews, beliefs, and values are affecting and affected by the way humans live, and therefore connected to sustainability. And this is important because regardless of whether people consider themselves religious or not, everyone has a worldview, everyone has beliefs and values. And they are not always obvious, and our apprehensions are not rational in the sense that we just sit down and think them through from all possible angles and decide on a system that is coherent and consistent and act from that. Rather, our beliefs and values are the fruits of the interplay between the concrete lives we live and our reflections on our lives and the existential questions. But we all have these apprehensions, even though we're not always aware of them and how they are affecting our lives. Worldviews contain many different aspects that has to do with, for example, values, how we think about what is important in life, norms, how we think that we should live our lives, ontology, what we think is real and what exists, and how the things that exist are constituted and what their nature is. And also, of course, religious and philosophical convictions and practices. So if we take an example, it could be, what does it mean to be human? It's a broad question that includes many different perspectives. Questions like, do all human beings share some characteristics, or are humans essentially different? Are humans essentially good? Is there a purpose to human lives or a meaning? Do humans hold an acceptable position in relation to nature or the more than human world? How can we motivate that all humans have the same value and dignity? How extensive is human freedom? To what extent can humans change? These are different questions that we might ponder when we think about what it is to be human. And depending on your answer to these questions, different ways of lives seems reasonable and good to you. And the answer also inform politics and the way we organize our societies. And although many people today are not aware of it, our history as individuals and as societies permeates our knowledge, our beliefs, our worldviews, and our values. And this means that our beliefs and values are not rational in the sense that we choose them freely, and that we choose what we want to think about the world. It rather means that we take some things for granted, while others feel instinctively uncomfortable or repulsive, without us always knowing why. It means that there are political, social, and religious patterns that structure our thinking and our ways of living in ways we need to become aware of if we will be able to act and think differently. And this is also where my field comes in. These different existential questions are not only apprehensions that everyone holds personally or as a society. These questions have, of course, been studied for millennia by philosophers and theologians and are continued to be studied today in the academy. And we study them systematically and critically in the sense that we want to understand different positions, scrutinize the arguments, and discuss what arguments are weaker and stronger in different contexts. And one example of this is the question, what does it mean when researchers say that the present situation of unsustainability is not only a matter of unsustainable lifestyles and societies, but of unsustainable worldviews, beliefs, and values that modernity has caused and that need to change? And in what sense is that true? When we look around us and see that we as humans have done so much damage to the world, and we see the effects of the climate change, the biodiversity loss, and the poverty, the inequalities, and the oppressions, it's easy to slide into some kind of nostalgic mood, long for times when people lived in harmony with the planet and each other. It is true that modernity has brought along many devastating effects, and we are able to create technologies that we cannot know the effects of in the long run. No one knew what disastrous effects would be of the petrol engine or the coal power plants. We can also see, not least in some Western countries, rampant individualism and a loss of purpose and meaning for many people. And to some researchers, modernity to a large extent signifies what is destructive in our world today. And in the Western world, or the global North, what we have called the Enlightenment, or the liberal tradition, or the humanism, really changed the world in many ways. Rationalism and empiricism came to permeate philosophy and the emergent sciences with ideals of a rational and free human being who can study and understand the world as it really is through their reason and senses, and make accurate decisions on how to best construct the world around them. Nature came to be seen as a resource for humans and something we needed to control in order to make progress. So it was not only a discovery of the world that we did, it was also a construction of the world with consequences. For part of this thinking was also the idea that there is only one true human nature, and people who are different than the enlightened Westerners were actually considered less human and closer to nature, and could therefore be suppressed and forced into a way of life in accordance with Western ideals. And this is, of course, basis for slavery and colonialism and all the devastating consequences that this entails up unto our time. On the other hand, our view of nature today has become romanticized, not least in Sweden, where many people today have a very close relationship to nature. That is where many go to relax, to be inspired, to find a place for spirituality or to exercise. But in many parts of the Western world or the global North, we have not been as vulnerable to nature's forces like floodings and droughts as in the rest of the world, and as we used to be not so long ago. And this is a reason why we can view nature in mostly a positive light. This is, of course, changing now in the wake of climate change. But the reason that this relationship to nature has been possible for us is also the Enlightenment heritage. Thanks to modern technology and the medical sciences, we can now control nature in ways that for the most part of human history has been unimaginable. That is why we live longer, are less affected by diseases, less affected by famines and bad weather, and so on. But it's also thanks to the outcomes of the Enlightenment that we consider individual people important and worthy of protection and rights. The whole idea of human rights and the idea that individual people should have the possibility to make decisions about their own lives and have autonomy are also effects of the same tradition, as is democracy and equality. So the beliefs and values that inform the overarching worldview and practices of the global north are double-edged. On the one hand, they are a reason why we destroy nature and the climate, but they are also the reason why we have democracy, individual autonomy, and live longer. And this is one reason why I think that a theory of existential sustainability needs to relate to the double-edged heritage of modernity by not accepting a one-sided idea of modernity, neither a one-sided critique nor a one-sided praise. So to sum up, an important part of existential sustainability, as I see it, is the capacity for critical analysis and a willingness to approach complexity, not in a dichotomous either-or way, but as a simultaneity, both and. And further, another aspect of existential sustainability is to enhance the value of and the possibility for what the critics of modernity point out as missing: relationality and connection on the one hand, and meaning-making on the other. And to wrap up, I would like to shortly present a perspective of what it is to be human that we find helpful for spelling out what existential sustainability might mean. I have talked about the importance of understanding our history, and therefore I would like to turn to the German theorist of history, Jan Riessen. He claims that for humans to understand their existence, they need to interpret their existence by relating it to their history. What happened before us obviously affects how we live today. At the same time, we don't have a direct access to the past. A specific historical document or phenomenon or event is not intelligible on its own to us. We have to put them in relation to each other to understand them. We need to view them in light of their specific circumstances and what happened before and after them. And we do that by telling stories, Jan Riessen claims. We can only interpret an event by telling its story and thereby make it understandable. Then we can see how it affects us today. And Riessen claims that we need these interpretations of history to orient ourselves towards the future. By understanding our place in time and space, we can draw up lines for where we want to head in the future. Therefore, what he calls our historical consciousness is vital for change. Also, at a personal level, storytelling is important for human beings. Philosopher Hannah Arendt claims that philosophy tries to tell us what it is to be human by asking what a human being is. And then we're dealing with ontology. What is the human nature and what do humans share? For example, that we are rational beings and that we are relational beings. And then we try to answer the what question, according to Arendt. But to her, that is a reductive conception of human identity, because this will lead us away from the individual who is a unique individual. To approach the unique individual, you have to ask who instead, Arendt says. And the who question has another kind of answer, namely the story of that person's life. Human beings emerge as persons by speaking and acting and by telling their story. The story of a person's actions makes up their life story, as Arendt says. Who someone is or was, we can only experience by hearing the story where he is the protagonist. That is his biography. Arendt's student Adriana Cavarero reasons a bit like Riessen. She claims that the events of a person's lives are just events and you cannot understand them until they are linked together in a story. The life events and the way they are joined together makes up the unique life story of every individual. This means that every person is a unique existence who is narratable. But according to Cavallero, you always receive your story from the other. In the interaction with others, you are narrated by them. So lastly, as we see it, this narrative understanding of human identity is more mutual than both Arendt and Cavallero describes it. You tell your story, but you also receive it from others. Therefore, you are dependent on the other to tell you your story and to listen when you tell your story. And to us, that is more of a mutual relationship. And these processes of narrating are then how we make sense of life at a larger and a personal level. It is how we connect to other people, how we gain understanding and engage in processes of meaning-making. So one way of looking at existential sustainability is that an existentially sustainable society has to make room for these processes. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. Lovisa. It was a really nice presentation. The first question that came to my mind is, according to your topics, and you are external to EUGLOH, you could have like an objective eyes on what is happening today, what is happening around you and around us concerning this annual summit, and what is happening all the year with those different projects that are organized by EUGLOH. Do you think that that mutual relation that you talked about is applied also now, or we could do better, objectively?
That's a really hard question, but
No pressure, of course.
but I think in Sweden, for example, different studies show that there is a high degree of loneliness in the population, and that is also true for many other countries. So I think that there are different existential dimensions of the problems that societies are facing. And I think people are very aware of that, but that it should be even further in our mind when we think about these problems.
So you're telling that Lund University, when, for example, they meet Porto University, then they seem happier?
I'm not sure.
Less loneliness?
Sorry?
So like the collaboration that are making by EUGLOH could also improve the environment for students in your university, for example?
Definitely. And the focus on students here is fascinating for an outsider, and I think that's really a way of enhancing existential health and existential perspectives as well. Yeah.
Thank you. It would be a pleasure to see you in a work package in a few months, if you want. Any question from the audience? Do not hesitate.
By education, I'm a chemist, so I will have a stupid question, but can we talk about global sustainability? Or it is changing from Sweden to Portugal, Europe to Asia, Africa, whatever?
Yes, I would think so. I mean, usually philosophers have been accused of trying to universalize their perspectives, but since several decades now, nobody talks about these perspectives as if they were applicable to every context, of course. So that is also why I think that there could be no program for existential sustainability to implement it, because the situations are, of course, different in different countries.
I would like to thank you again for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? If not, we can switch to Professor Pedro Nobre, that will try to do stuff that is pretty difficult, link his scientific or research topic to EUGLOH and give us some example on how different collaboration, especially on his topics, could lead to improvement, especially based on scientific clues that could really improve different research axes. So thank you, Professor Nobre.
I will use this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? So the sound is okay? Okay. So thank you very much. This is a privilege to be here with you all. Actually, I have to thank to my university, University of Porto, for inviting me, and thank the organizers for having me and accepting this presentation. My title is even longer than my colleague Cassan, as you can see, but I will focus actually on, let's say, psychological and mental health, and also sexual health in the context of global health, and why it is important to include mental health, psychological health, and well-being in sexual health among the core domains of global health, and actually also of EUGLOH and EUGLOHRIA. So I actually, when I look at the EUGLOH main topics, as you can see there, so this is what is on our website, and I will start by asking you to make a very simple psychological exercise, attention exercise. For the next, let's say, 10 seconds, could you please find where is psychological health or mental health or sexual health on these core domains of the EUGLOH?
Social and human sciences.
Anyone else? Anywhere or nowhere?
Medicine and health science.
You can see there, or you can do a very interesting exercise for where can it fit. But you can see probably over 10 or almost 20 terms there, and you never see the word psychology, mental health, or sexual health. So what I will try to do in the next 19 minutes is try to convince you why this is important to put mental health, psychological health, and well-being in the map of global health and the EUGLOH. I actually use mostly data from the WHO, so I didn't need to do anything else. Just look at data, global data, the World Health Organization, which just crossed 75 years last year. And so actually the definition of health by WHO is what you see there. Health is a state of completely physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So mental health is at the core of the definition itself. And then if you see further, the enjoyment, so the word enjoyment in itself is interesting. The enjoyment of highest attainable standards of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being. So you see the word rights or human rights attached to health, which is also a very key point. So I didn't invent this term, no health without mental health. Actually, it was WHO using this term. Mental health is more than the absence of mental disorders. This is also very important. So it's, of course, mental disorders are key, but mental health is more than just that. So from a positive perspective, promoting mental health and well-being is an integral part of health, as they say. It's determined by socioeconomic, biological, and of course also environmental factors. And the most important, we know right now, because there's enough evidence to say that we have cost-effective public health interventions. They exist, and they can promote, protect, and even restore mental health. The World Mental Health Report was published 3 years ago. I will actually briefly guide you through some of the main facts related to mental health. So again, this is WHO information. In 2019, 1 in every 8 people in the world, so around the world, almost 1,000 million people, were living with a mental disorder, a diagnosable mental disorder. Anxiety and depressive disorders are the most common among those mental disorders. And even more important, during the COVID, the first estimates show that there was an increase of almost 30%, 26 to 28% increase in anxiety and depression due to the COVID. So we don't have, at least I'm not aware of recent data after a couple of years after the COVID, but it's interesting to see the facts about the important increase in mental disorders, particularly anxiety and depression, due to the COVID and the pandemic. if you look at this picture, you can see actually that the most common, or the two most common disorders are clearly anxiety and depressive disorders. Almost 2/3 of the disorders, or around 60% of the mental disorders, are related to anxiety and depressive disorders, a little bit less development disorders, attention and deficits of hyperactivity. But if you look at your right-hand side, you look at, it's interesting to see that the estimates of mental disorders are higher in the high-income countries compared to the lower-income countries. So around 13%, but around 15% in the higher-income countries, a little bit less in the lower-income countries. Another very important aspect, it's not just having a mental disorder, is that that mental disorders are the leading cause of disability. So what data is saying is it causes 1 in 6 years lived with disability. And also very important, people with severe mental health die on average 10 to 20 years earlier than the general population. So this is, if you look at it, this is an amazing, overwhelming fact. And it's mostly due to preventable physical disease. They don't die of mental disorders. They could suicide. I will present also data on suicide, but most due to preventable physical diseases, and because they are depressed, anxious, or with different mental disorders. The burden of mental disorders, there's also data on the burden. And one of the interesting findings is that proportion of all-cause years lived with disability attributable to mental disorders is almost 16%. So the disabilities, the percentage of disability, the all-cause years of lived with disabilities is 1 in 6, as we said previously. And the global burden of mental disorders. Here you can see a reverse pattern where depression is much more important than the other mental disorders, which means that depression plays a very important role in terms of the burden attached to it. And by the way, interesting findings, women suffer in average more than men of mental disorders and of the burden of mental disorders. Another very important fact, stigma and discrimination. Although we are on 2024, there's still stigma, there's still discrimination all over the world, and also actually in Europe. Human rights violations against people with mental health conditions are still widespread. There are still 20 countries around the world who criminalize attempted suicide, for instance. And again, important, the poorest and the most disadvantaged are the ones who are at great risk of mental ill health. So suicide data regarding suicide, suicide accounts for 1 in every 100 deaths globally. So 1% of the deaths is suicide, most recent data. But what is interesting, if you look at the bars, you see that most cases of, or the highest level of suicides are among the youngest population, so before 40 years old. Actually, almost 60% of the suicides happen before the age of 50. So this is also very important to see. So to sum up this part, we can say that mental health conditions are widespread, 1 in 8. Undertreated, that's another important aspect. One example is people with psychosis, which has a very important impact on the person's life, family, and society at large, do not receive mental health services around the globe. And under-resourced, the data shows that only 2% of health budgets, 2% of health budgets around the world goes to mental health, so 2 in 100. Information gap. This is important for us as researchers, higher education institutions. There's incomplete data. Many countries do not report data to WHO. Insufficient research, and we can do much better on that, particularly on the least and middle income countries. And there's also a governance gap. So this is why it's important to close the gap between, of course, research, knowledge, but also how can we transform this knowledge into policies that make people's lives better. Inadequate policies, plans, and laws, this is WHO saying, and misplaced priorities, meaning, for instance, that 2 out of every $3, so 2/3 of the budget spent on mental health, 2/3 of the budget spent on mental health goes to psychiatric hospitals. So this says a lot about how we are investing our money in terms of promoting mental health overall. In terms of research also, gaps in mental health research, the data shows that less than 5% of the health research focus on mental health. So that's probably the reason why mental health is not on our EUGLOH definition. But again, this is even lower in low-income countries as it was expected. So there's a lot of benefits on improved mental health. Of course, you can look at the health impact, the death, actually, to start with, the life expectancies, the reduced suicide, and the health of others, but also social impact, the informal caregiving, which is an important burden for many, could decrease social function and household production increases, and a number of economic potential impacts at several levels. So it's not just making people better, it's not only the health impact of the person, but the environment, the family, the social impact, and the economic impact also. So moving into sexual health, if I still have a few minutes. And sexual health, of course, it's a different dimension, but actually is closely linked with mental health. I should have said at the beginning that I'm a psychologist by training, a clinical psychologist, a PhD in clinical psychology, and most of my research life was dedicated to sexual research. So that's why these topics are so important to me and meaningful to me. So mental health, psychological health, well-being, and also sexual health. But if you look at this definition, again, WHO definition, it has over 20 years now. The definition of sexual health, if you look at it, is also similar to the definition of global health, a state of physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being in relation to sexuality. And again, not merely the absence of disease. And also, WHO emphasizes that sexual health requires a positive approach. This is a very important aspect. And the possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences. So the word pleasure is also important and safe, free of coercion, discrimination, and violence. So these are the main definition. And again, WHO presented a framework connecting sexual health with reproductive health. This is an important linkage because I'm not sure if you are aware, but there's a specific branch of WHO that is dedicated to sexual and reproductive health. It is called HRP, Human Reproduction Program, and is now over 50 years. But they started focusing only on reproduction, and they are now more and more into sexual health aspects. So the yellow dimensions here are more related to reproduction, and the blue are the ones more related with sexual health. But of course, they are closely together. But I would just want to emphasize that sexual health is much more than just, of course, reproductive health. And again, sexual health is strongly linked with, I would say, many different sustainable development goals. Health, education, comprehensive sexuality education is a very important dimension of sexual health. Gender equality is at the core of sexual health, actually. Reduced inequalities, and also actually peace, justice, and strong institutions. There is evidence showing there's a link between sexual health and all of these dimensions. And again, a little bit of facts related to sexual health. WHO, also the HRP, the program that I just released, the annual reports of 2023 with a number of facts. And here you can see some of very, let's say, very important facts. very different areas there, but all related to sexual health and reproductive health. 164 million women of reproductive age worldwide have an unmet need for contraception. Every day, over 1 million people acquire a sexual transmitted infection. Over 500,000 people every year infected with HPV developed cervical cancer cases. 650,000 people every day still die of HIV-related causes. And as we've seen this morning, actually, there's an increased range of people infected with HIV in Europe right now. 800 women die from preventable causes related to pregnancy and childbirth, still today. 1 in 6 people globally experience infertility. And finally, I would say very important and actually in their lifetime, 1 in 3 women worldwide is subject to physical or sexual intimate partner or non-partner sexual violence. 1 in 3. This should shock us still today. Female genital mutilation, for instance, is still practices in different countries around the world, and we estimate that affects over 200 million women. 200 million affected by female genital mutilation, mostly girls globally. And no region seems to be on track to meet the SDG target of eliminating child marriage. So there's still child marriage in many countries around the world. To conclude this part, just to say also sexual dysfunctions, which is a topic that interests me most, are a leading cause of distress. So there's evidence supporting that. It's estimated, of course it's different in different countries, but we estimate that between 20% and 35% of the population suffer from some sort of sexual difficulties. And the other important aspect that sexual dysfunctions is closely related to depression and anxiety disorder. So again, the connection between sexual health and sexual dysfunctions in particular and mental health is very important and strong. We know also that sexual health is associated with global health indicators. There's recent data showing that sexual health is related to all-cause mortality or the absence of sexual health, with longevity, with number of physical illnesses, and also with depression, and also associated with well-being in a positive perspective, subjective well-being, life satisfaction, positive effect, and quality of life. So for all of these, we have data. But despite this data, and that's my challenge right now, despite the data and despite actually there's a lot of data on reproductive health and data also HIV, AIDS, and STIs, but there are several dimensions that are understudied. Sexual satisfaction, so the pleasure we take from sexual life, the well-being, pleasure and well-being, then the sexual rights and justice are all of them understudied. And the other important aspect is that most of the little we know from the global north. There's almost nothing on these topics besides HIV and reproductive health in the global south. And there's also a lack of comparable cross-national studies, meaning that what we know in the global north, in many countries, in most times it's not comparable because they're not using the same measures, the same surveys. So I'll conclude with 2 or 3 challenges. One, this is actually one new, very recent survey from WHO developed sexual health assessment of practices and experiences. And the idea is actually to have a global survey covering many dimensions of sexual health to be used across the globe. And one of the main projects I am involved with, I had the privilege to preside the World Association of Sexual Health in the past, so we started this idea of building the World Observatory of Sexual Health. to cover the gap on the knowledge we know about sexual health. And this project, this is still a project, an idea. We will need, of course, resources, funding, networking. We are already started networking globally, but it will be very important if the EUGLOH network could join us and help us moving forward at the University of Porto. We have some resources. We have a research center dedicated to psychology, covering most of the aspects that we have been talking on mental health, psychological health, well-being, and we have a specific group dedicated to sexuality and gender research group on our faculty. We have actually also a sex lab, which there's not many around the world. I will say we have probably 10, 15 around the world, mostly North America and Northern Europe, but not much actually in Southern Europe. I'm not sure if there's anyone else at the EUGLOH Alliance. I think not. But if you want to see a little bit of what we do there, please, you can take a picture of the QR codes and you could go inside the lab. We also have doctoral programs in psychology and one unique doctoral program in human sexuality, which is, again, the only one that we are aware, dedicated to sex research in Europe. And so, to sum up, I would say that we have the willingness, we have the resources, we have research capacity, and we are very open to, together with others from the EUGLOH, to develop this agenda of making sure we include mental health, psychological health, and sexual health at the core of EUGLOH and global health. So thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much for that really nice presentation. I think me and all of us learn a lot of stuff. The first question that came to my mind when you present the sex lab and the problem of having only data from North America, Central Europe and Northern Europe, is that, did you think maybe yes, that in EUGLOH there are 9 universities but more than 40 nationalities inside these universities, and maybe there is the plan to do a survey with those different questions according to the uni, according to the students where they grow and where they're studying now. Are there any scientific plan like that?
I think that is an amazing question. Not exactly the one that you said you were going to ask him, but even better. And the reason why I think it's even better, because I think that is why I think EUGLOH is an opportunity, is that bringing together different universities, but also not only the diversity of the universities in itself, covering Western, Eastern European countries, Southern and Northern European countries, but also, as you said, the ability to involve people and students and also actually researchers and professors who come from around the world. I think that will be probably the most important aspect of this opportunity. So, as I said, I mean, I think I was pretty clear. Of course, we at the University of Porto and our faculty have resources. We have a lab, we have a doctoral program. We work together with, not only within university, with other disciplines. We have the faculty of medicine also involved, the biomedicals also involved. But we have a network, a global network also. And actually, just to say that, unfortunately, there's not many in our network, global network, there's not many of the EUGLOH universities. But I can share with you that we had already projects with Hamburg University, and I'm very happy that Hamburg is now included in the EUGLOH. And I am very willing to connect with others from the other 8 universities of the EUGLOH to advance this agenda. I'm sure there will be colleagues who are working on these topics and students, so I'll use this space to welcome everyone, and if you are willing, just contact me. I'll be happy to engage in conversations.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question from the audience about this subject or one of the 3 subjects we talked about today?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. obviously, as a medical doctor, I am interested in many of these areas. But I am also particularly interested on dementia. You mentioned essentially anxiety and depression.
Yes.
But with the aging problems in the countries that
Yes.
make part of EUGLOH,
Yes.
dementia will be a tremendous problem
Yes.
in the future. How to manage them in addition to nursing homes, because it's not in psychiatric hospitals,
Yes,
not
yes.
in ambulatory
Yeah.
situations. How, as a psychologist,
Mhm.
would you recommend to solve the problem?
Well,
First, and
Yes.
second, how to teach the students?
good. Well, I'm not a specialist in dementia, so let me start by saying that I don't have a miracle answer to that. But I would say that there is a very important. I mean, we are all aging. Actually, this morning we discussed. There was a presentation discussing also the importance, or not important. What will happen? What is already happening, and will still. So the number of people with 65 or older will probably outnumber, in Portugal already outnumber the number of people under 20, I guess. So in Portugal, in other countries, it will be even worse. So all the problems will, and it's not only dementia is one, of course, and that definitely will make a huge impact, but also those depression and anxiety disorders will tend to at some point increase also with aging in some people. So the number and the quality of life that is needed, it puts a lot of, how do you say, it puts a lot of pressure in the system. And I don't think the system will solve putting many in hospitals, whether they're psychiatric or others. So I think educating people for preventing, to not only know about mental disorders, about dementia, about its effects, and also, of course, caregivers are very important, I would say. But again, I'm not a specialist. But we need to put this into the public agenda, public awareness. I'm not sure. I don't think we are doing that, and I don't think we are supporting also the caregivers, who are very important, I would say. Without them, there's no hospitals that will ever solve the issue of not only dementia, other psychiatric, more stronger, let's say, psychosis or other kinds of more not chronic but problematic psychiatric disorders. So
Thank you very much. Is there, yeah.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. But I was thinking, well, first of all, I believe that we should add psychology and mental health to EUGLOH's coordination.
Thank you.
It was very persuasive in that aspect. But I was thinking of articulating your presentation with the previous presentation, because we are told of existential health.
Yeah.
So could we think of anxiety, because you
Mhm.
told us about different types of mental disorder, but anxiety predominates. So could we think of anxiety as a sort of existential problem rather than a mental problem?
Good question. I'm not sure how to answer, because but yeah, well, the question of labeling is important. There's stigma, of course, and there's still stigma and discrimination around the word mental health or mental disorder. And so from that perspective, framing it into a different framework could be helpful. I would say that it's important. I mean, when I started studying, one of the studying mental health and not only depression and anxiety, because they are very interconnected. But one of the things that amazed me is the fact that we say that around 15% have a mental disorder, but it is currently. If we add studies about lifetime mental disorders, there are studies saying that a fourth to half of people at some point in their lives had a diagnosable mental disorder, depression and anxiety being the most common. So it's part of life in that sense. So framing that as existential life experience, I'm not sure if this makes sense, is it could be a way to decrease stigma and discrimination because it's part of life. Almost everyone in their lifetime will definitely have a problem related to, or psychological problem, either being depression, anxiety. It could be not at the level of significant clinical impact, but most probably at some point, definitely at that level. So if I look around, I won't ask this. Probably you all will raise your hand saying that, yes, at some point in my life, I was depressed. I was strongly, severely anxious, and so far and so forth. So that is part of life. So not sure if Lovisa will agree with me, but it will be probably another way of framing the mental health component.
So thank you for that amazing presentation. I would like to conclude because
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would like to conclude because we are already a bit late. It was really nice having you all here and having all that kind of question. So I would like to thank first EUGLOH for organizing that annual summit and organizing that roundtable. Really interesting, and I think we should have more of that because it leads to amazing conversation. I would like to thank Professor Zoltán, of course, for helping organizing. I would like to thank Professor Cassan, Prof.Dr. Lovisa Nyman, and Professor Pedro Nobre for their presentation and their involvement in that annual summit. Thank you.
And thank you also to you.
Thank you. Thank you, that's very kind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.